first, I'm really excited about being here today. Albeit wish I had a little bit more time to be prepared and to really give this team the full fact base that they deserve. But with that said, hopefully we'll all learn something today and we'll enjoy the session. Before I get into it, and thanks, Ben's going to be my Vanna White and move the slides for me because I'm afraid I'll go into cyber penalty box and we'll all be crashing. So if you want, you can go to the next slide. What I thought would happen today, okay, I guess I have to hit this continue to get it off there. Oh, very good. What I thought I'd do today is talk a little bit about PG&E, but then do it relative to the industry. So for those students on the line and for those not as familiar with the space outside California, given my background and expertise, I thought that would really provide a more broader perspective of what this special customer base that I'm going to talk about at the end has to deal with. So you're going to see I'm going to have PG&E up there, but I'm really going to be talking mostly about the industry. And then, although Yemen shared a very nice background on me, the one thing I wanted to really point out is the difference in my career of working big companies, Fortune 100 companies in chemicals and plastics, and then doing a wind energy startup or a small ticket leasing company, and the balance between big companies and small companies. Because again, that allows me to personally experience what our customers deal with, from small businesses all the way to the big corporations, and then being a residential customer. And then one of the things that I have a benefit of that a lot in the utility space don't, because it is such a stable industry, people usually go to utility and they can work there for, it's not unusual if you're 30, 40, some people even work 45 years at a utility. I've had the pleasure, I started my career in chemicals and plastics. I just had a natural curiosity about how things work, how you put chemicals together, how they react. And I transitioned, and that curiosity really helped me when I went into the energy space because of the overall complexity that kind of underlines this industry. So the balance of my career, it's been in the utility space with 3 utilities, and then I did one wind energy startup that got acquired by Iberdrola. So you can count that as a 4th utility or a startup. I'll let you guys split hairs on that. And then one really interesting thing I did was I did a stint in small ticket leasing. And to be quite honest, it was not the most pleasant of experience. But boy, when I was in corporate strategy at PG&E, which I started in, we did tax equity investments in solar companies who, oh, by the way, were using leasing as an alternative financing mechanism to grow the industry. So I'm like, it's haunting me. It came back to haunt me, fair market value, dollar buyout. So again, for the students, you never know where your path's going to take you, but somehow you learn from each one of those paths and you can incorporate it in your wherever you land. So if you want to go to the next slide. All right, so this is PG&E. And I'm not going to read what's on this slide, but what I'm going to try to do is provide context for PG&E. We are the largest operating utility in the United States, and we are a single state jurisdictional utility, meaning we only operate in the state of California. You'll hear this single state, multi-state jurisdictional utility. So I went across, and when I was in corporate strategy, this used to be at my fingertips. So I spent the last week trying to find facts on websites. But when you look across the utility landscape, and I use EEI, their data set from 2020 that uses a variety of years, but we're actually 4th in the total number of customers behind Exelon, Duke, and First Energy. We're actually 14th in overall megawatt sales behind Duke, Exelon, AEP, First Energy, just to name a few. We're actually 4th in electric revenue behind Exelon, Duke, and Southern. We're actually 4th in the number of employees behind Duke, Southern, and Exelon. And so I actually found a stat on, we are fourth, the state of California. They didn't break it out by utility. The state of California is the fourth. This is where you don't want to be fourth in prices for residential rates. And we fall, Hawaii is the most expensive, then it is Rhode Island, Alaska, and then California. And again, it's on average, and we come in at residential at like 22.26 cents. And again, that data was from 2020. Well, what was an interesting stat that I found from 2017 is that California is actually second in carbon dioxide emissions behind Texas. So when you look at that, you might sit there, and while we are the largest single operating utility in the United States, when I entered this industry back in the 90s, there were over 200 investor-owned utilities. Investor-owned utilities means it's in the capital markets. We have investors, they expect a return. And now there's just over 40. And those 40 have about 140 operating companies. And again, another interesting stat that I saw, albeit it was dated, is that the average market cap used to be around $1 billion for utilities, and now it's about $7 billion. And I would say it's even higher than that, because that was the dated stat. So where single state jurisdictional utilities were the norm. When I came in, I worked at Pico Energy. We had the city of Philadelphia and the 5 counties. You have New York, Con Ed is New York City and the boroughs. You have ComEd in Chicago and its surrounding suburbs. What we see now are really large utilities doing M&A, and we have a very top-heavy, big majority of the industry run by these big multi-state jurisdictional. And for example, First Energy is 10 operating companies, 5 states. Exelon is 6 operating companies, 5 states, and the District of Columbia. Duke is 6 operating companies, 5 states. Southern, 3 operating companies, 3 states. And then I put in NextEra, which is Florida Power and Light, the corporate holding company. That's actually 1 operating company in 1 state, but it's doing its growth through renewables. So over the last probably 2 decades, maybe even 3 decades, there's been a lot of consolidation in the industry, and yet here PG&E still stands single state jurisdictional utility. Now, some might say, well, why was there this consolidation? And you can look at trends that point to a lot. We're looking at regulatory diversification. This is a very policy-heavy industry at the state, federal, and sometimes local level. Others were looking at complementary assets. They had some electric, they wanted some gas, they had gas distribution, maybe they wanted gas transmission, but complementary assets. Some just growth and expanding their service territory, synergy savings from operations and lessons learned. But I think finally one is really de-risking. You look at Exelon, an interesting case study. Its generation used to print money for the corporation, then there was a downturn in that market, and now it's heavily going into really regulated utilities with its 6 operating companies. This topic, I think, could be a seminar in itself, and it's something that in my previous role in corporate strategy, I used to educate our board about. Because if you don't come from the industry, you think, well, a utility is a utility is a utility. It's the hometown team, but not necessarily. It used to be that way, but not necessarily now, with a handful of majors really at the top of the industry. So if you go to the next slide. When you look at this, you look at a power mix, and if you look at in the industry, the utility value chain, it usually starts with generation, transmission, distribution, and then energy services, or what I would call customer. Generation plays a huge role in this value chain because it's the actual commodity. It's what's actually gets used. And when you look at this slide, I react to it in 2 ways. You can say, again, policy, and that there's mandates, and that state by state, utility by utility, there are different goals for renewable energy of which states have to meet. But what I dig and I click into it, and it's really kind of the corporate strategist in me coming out. I look at this and I say, how do we put this in context of that landscape I just described? And when you look at it, it really comes down to deregulation of the electric utility industry has had a hit or miss, depending on who you talk to, success or lack of success. And I'm not going to get into debate that. It is what it is. But currently now it exists in about 17 states for electricity and about 25 states for gas. No state is completely deregulated, meaning that, Texas is the closest in that their utilities do not have this solar obligation or provider of last resort. But when you look at Exxon, it operates in deregulated states, meaning they are the supplier of last resort, but the market, people can buy and sell electricity from multiple suppliers. Duke operates in regulated states with the exception of Ohio. Southern operates in all regulated states. Now, you look at it and say, okay, deregulation is usually driven by expensive commodity KWH and large industrial commercials as well as market participants push to say, let's deregulate, you can get cheaper prices on the open market. When I look at, that's the case, that's, makes logical sense. But what underpins that is what is the role of the actual utility, the host utility? So in California, we're in a hybrid state of deregulation. We've grandfathered in what we call direct access, which is open markets. We have choice being introduced through community choice aggregators, where communities and counties can come in and they can procure on behalf of their citizens, and it's an opt-out type of program. But what really this comes down to for me is that utility's role as a poller, that they have to provide power in the event that the power isn't put on by those third-party suppliers. So if they fail to deliver, we have to step in. And in most regulated states, you'll see the generation mix usually equals the customer demand. I went and did a quick look at like Duke and Southern Company. So if the demand's 1,000, they produce 1,000. They have enough generation for 1,000, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. When you look at PG&E in contrast to that, hybrid state of deregulation, CCAs coming in. I just looked at our annual report, and if my head's down so I can quote facts correctly, based on our annual report, Exhibit D, we purchase about 12% of the power that we provide to our customers, and we generate 36%. So if you add that up, we're about 48% where the utility provides power, and 52% is by the market. So when you look, bringing it all back to Polly saying, where's she going with all this? When you look at these renewable energy standards, as our load goes down, the absolute megawatts of renewables that we need to meet these compliances goes down as well, because the market's taking care of generation. The market is doing the renewables. So where before, when you supply 100% of the power, if you have to be 60% renewable, versus if you only supply 48% of the power and you have to be 60% renewable. So it is something that you need to keep in mind as you look at this industry and you look at these renewable mandates throughout the country. What does it really mean on the utility and the generation mix? Because then it's the role of generation within the utility. And I will touch on a case study touches on should it be renewable or should it be GHG reduction, but that's a topic for another seminar, which hopefully I'll get invited back to. So if you go to the next slide, and thank you, Ben, for doing this. I feel like, next slide, please. So you look at this, and again, I love to see how people react to this. Some are like, oh, look, it's solar. Some are like, wow, look at all this policy. Oh, and then it's like, well, what are you doing? You know, there's lots of messaging. I really look at this and see policy does play a big role in this industry, as it should. As it should. We are a public service obligation with a franchise service territory in which a formula determines our margins. So policy plays a role. If you come into this industry and you have a rejection of policy, you will not be successful. You have to learn to navigate between local, state, and federal policy. But what I also see on this slide, which is really very encouraging to me, look. Uh-oh. Do you guys still hear me and see me?
Yeah, we see you. We hear you.
Okay, I just lost everything. Okay. This is, let me see if it comes back. Okay, there you go. Welcome to this cyber ghost that haunt me. I look at this slide and I get very encouraged because what I see on here is actually what customers want. So we've done a lot of research and we call it the 5 C's. Customers want choice and control, cost, communication, commitment or cycle time, and convenience. So when I see solar, I see that's choice and control. And to me, I get encouraged that policy can also drive what customers want. And when I look at choice and control, I say, are we utilities? Is policy supporting options and alternatives for customers to consider? So you look at solar is just the tip of the iceberg and it's been out there the longest, but now we have electric vehicles, storage, energy efficiency programs, demand response. So I look at this and say, okay, we are actually, the regulated element is allowing for choice. So if we can go to the next slide, thank you, Ben. Then what might be the majority of large corporate America invest in its communities and the programs that they have are, well known. But it's particularly important for a utility because we are local. And regardless of the state, the size, or the type, or even the corporate structure, utilities, truly, it is a privilege and an honor to serve our customers. And I know that the word privilege and honor gets thrown around a lot in the industry. But Deborah Affonsa, I truly believe that as a public service provider with a franchise territory, we really do. It is indeed a privilege and honor to serve our customers who live and work in the communities that we supply power to. And so you'll see utilities, not just PG&E, we give back. And we give back because not only is it the right thing to do, but it really enhances our employee engagement. Our folks live there. There's nothing, our guys out in the field, nothing they're more proud of than their blue trucks, and they go out and people, high five and recognize them. And we do see customers in our customer satisfaction surveys, they love our people. The issues are more with the corporation. So utilities do give back. If you can go to the next slide. And we have a new CEO, Patty Poppy from Michigan. She came on just recently, and she is just bringing such a new sense of purpose and pride in what we do. And one of the terms that she is that we have to become this hometown company, that PG&E has suffered from this big corporate, greed, profits over safety. And she really is pushing this hometown look and feel. And that starts with our people And it starts with the company's policies toward, we believe in diversity and inclusion. We believe in employee development. We believe in our employees speaking up and telling us, what we're not doing right. And we actually embrace our differences as a way for us all to grow, to learn, to improve ourselves, and also to improve the people that we work with. I've been in this industry since 1996. And my first boss, God love him, Fred Pierce, he had a 96-year-old mother that Fred lived by her philosophy. And it was 3 sentences. And I have shamelessly stole those sentences. And I feel like I need to give the ownership of those sentences to Fred's mom every time I share them, because it's, I care, you matter, this should be fun. And I think nothing embraces a utility more than that, our people, we really do care. What we do really matters to our communities. And while this term fun might seem a little awkward, we should be able to laugh and smile and enjoy and see the benefits of the work that we do. So it is about people. Any company, I don't care if you're a utility, a university, work gets done through and with your people. So utilities, particularly because they're frontline, they're out in adverse conditions, really do look at employee engagement and developing the people. And then we can go to the next slide. And this is just more additional stats to show. Again, you can dislike the corporation, but I would highly encourage you to give our employees a chance. They really do give back. They're so generous, not only for us, but for when there's a problem in the Philippines. We did, a fundraiser when they had their tsunami. We do all kinds of what I would call extracurricular donations and fundraisers for those that are near and dear to us. So the next slide. Okay, now I'm good. So that kind of describes the industry. So all utilities aren't the same. There are differences based, state by state, utility by utility. And then you look at it and say, not all utilities have the same customer base. Mike Morelli's customer base doesn't look like ours up here at PG&E, even though we're in the same state. Some similarities, but there are differences. So I wanted to get at the efforts that we are doing specific with the customer. And I start with this because a lot of people, if you come into the industry, you'll hear this, utilities make money on rate base. They put capital in the ground, they get a return, and that's how they make money. And I'm here to, this is a Deborah Affonsa, I'm going to myth bust that. Rate base with an ROE is the formula to calculate our margin. We have a formulaic calculation of margin. We really, just like everybody else, actually make money when customers pay their bills. And we see the impact of this right now as an industry with COVID-19, where there are challenges. We're not allowed to do shutoffs for non-pay. There are real challenges for people paying their bills. So I don't care what your rate base is, and I don't care what your percentage ROE is on that rate base. If customers aren't paying, you're not going to make money. So I think we really need to reshape that within the utility sector in that, yes, that's a great formula. If I'm Amazon, I'm Zappos, I'm any retailer, I'm my retail customer. Walmart, they make margin based on supply and demand and the willingness of the customer to pay for the product and the competitive environment around it. That's how they make margin. In the chemical companies, huge capital budgets. They don't have a formulaic calculation. It's based on supply and demand, what their competitors are selling it for, and that's how you determine it. So I think as an industry, yes, it's a formula because we are a public service, but it really comes down to customers paying the bills. And we need to use that as our guidepost for investment so that we really respect the people that we have the honor and privilege to serve. So what about our customer team? Let's go to the next slide. And this really gets into what the topic of this is our philosophical approach. When you look at the utility sector, there are varying degrees of, do customers matter? We used to hear that when I was in the industry. Well, who cares about the customer? They got to buy from us anyway. We're a monopoly. We're a utility. They're going to have to buy from us. And that has evolved tremendously over the last 2 decades. And so when we look at it specific to PG&E, what we're trying to do is really transform the customer experience, meaning that's not the transaction, not to say, oh, we completed the transaction on the web. We completed the transaction with the live agent or the IVR. It really is, the customer was like, that was a good experience. I enjoyed it. I got my work done. I got what I needed to get done. They were pleasant. They were happy. They were easy, whatever it is. So it's really about this experience. But the underpin of that for us and customers, because gas and electric are very dangerous products. We fail to realize that. We flip the switch, we turn the burner on, we've been using them for years. They are dangerous products. So safety is non-negotiable. Compliance is not voluntary. Customer at the center of what we do is mandatory. And effectiveness is the key to efficiency. So being a public service, being a monopoly, first thing people say, oh, you don't care about cost. You don't care. We have to buy from you anyway. And we're erasing that from our mindset. We're saying, let's see high quality and low cost, or at least competitive cost. So these are what our guiding principles are. And then if you go to the next slide. And for some of you, because this is graduate level folks and folks that are on the phone and been in business forever, you might look at these and say, holy moly, these don't really look that, earth-shattering and futuristic. But in the utility sector, we've really embraced it. PG&E, customer segmentation, journey mapping, channels, and then a digital customer platform. And I'm going to hold off on segmentation because the rest of the presentation or discussion is about that. And I'm going to look at this customer journey mapping, and you're like, okay, well, what is that? Utilities are very process-driven. We have ISO 55000, we have PAS, we have all these different process-oriented where we look internally, say, what is the process? Customer journey mapping is flipping it on its head and saying, how does the customer experience us? What is their actual journey with PG&E? I want to start a service. What do I, as a customer, have to do? So at PG&E, we've identified 7 customer journeys. These are critical paths that customers interact with PG&E. And in each of those journeys, we have what is called a moment of truth. And that's an interaction. So I have to talk to a rep. I have to provide paperwork. And we have 32 of what we call these MOTs in these journeys. So we are really focused on how do we improve the customer journey, the actual interaction, and how do we then overlay this with our internal processes and procedures to say we need to redesign these to actually meet our customer needs, not our needs. We're really good at meeting our needs and being very efficient and effective, and it's like that met our needs, but the customer had to go through 86 steps to do 2 things. Improve customer channel. So when I say channel, it really is the web, contact center. Did you call? Did you stay on the IVR, which is, punching through? Is it mail? We still do so much by mail. It is unbelievable the amount of paper that goes to and from customers. So right now, I'm actually leading my strategic project right now. Is look at these customer channels, overlaying them with journeys to say, there's got to be a better way. We are in the digital world, and we still do a lot of what I call assisted customer service instead of digital customer service on your time, your issue, whenever. And then the final is the technology platform. And technology, this is another Deborah Fonzism here. Technology enables customer service. And I like to call that and say, I can't use the word, but I call that and say, yeah, no, technology is customer service. How many of us without technology would be able to do our customer service? How many without a computer? It's stop with this, it enables, it actually is customer service. The issue that we have is that I had a Harvard professor who would say, a 5-star crappy process automated is still a 5-star crappy automated process. So what you have to really look at before you overlay technology is, have you driven, are you delivering quality? Is it effective? Does it meet the customer needs? Are you efficient? And then you use technology as an overlay to then introduce anywhere, anytime customer service. Now, what I will say about technology, and I'm really excited about it, we have a relationship with Salesforce. And I'm sorry, you guys, I keep losing you. I don't know, maybe it's the PG&E.
We can still, we still hear you and we see you.
Okay. Let me keep going back. We have a great relationship with Salesforce. And what I'm really excited about is what they call Einstein. And that is their artificial intelligence. And what the technology will provide us is the ability to customize at the individual customer level, at the residential level, an experience. And we lag in this. You go to financial services or you get Walmart.com, you go on there, they know what you've just been and where you've been in there. You know, if I'm looking for, surfboards for my grandkids, they're saying, well, do you want beach towels and sunscreen? So this technology will help us customize our experiences for our residential customers using, again, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and algorithms, all within the context of the California privacy, because California has very strict customer privacy rules. So if these are kind of what we look at in PG&E to say, if we're going to improve our relationship, our experiences, and our ability to deliver with customers, these are the levers that we have to move, and we're deeply engaged in each one of them. So let's go to the next slide. Now, this is where I get, this is where the law of averages in the utility sector and in any sector, really, you really have to double click in. Somebody says, well, your average cost is, and I'm like, well, there is no average. We have a bipolar distribution of cost. So we have really expensive and really cheap. So on average, it looks good. But if you look at the average, you'd be like, oh, okay, average is math issue. So when we look at this, I'm looking at the customers, and we 47% residential and 53% business is our revenue. You look at the number of customers, it's split, 93% residential and only 5% business. What is so interesting to me in the utility sector, not just PG&E, in every utility I've been at, when they talk customer, they go right to the residential customer. And when I entered the industry in 1996, they said, well, it's because those people vote. And because this is a policy driven and there's elected people that are engaged in this, they really look at the residential customer. And that was back again in 96. And I'm like, So what we have done, and again, you can see the 5 C's of what customers are really looking at from our experience and our research. So what we did back in 2014 is said, looking at it residential, I loved it. It was residential and non-residential. They didn't even say business. It was residential and you're non-residential, or your core or your non-core. I'm like, well, that makes me feel really good. But in 2014, we went and said, we're going to unpack residential and we're going to unpack business. You can't keep ignoring business customers. Look at the contribution to revenue that they have. You look at residential customers, and I say, we have 300, 400,000 solar customers. It's been slightly disruptive to our business, but you learn to adapt, you move forward, and you know this is what you want. If we took our business customers and stack ranked them and we lost the top 100, that would have major ramifications for the entire system, all customers. So we need to understand both our res and our business customers. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, I'm now going to go through residential, small business, and then our large, so in 2014 we said we are going to dig in, and we got data scientists, we have black belts who can, they eat and sleep statistics, and my head explodes when they talk to me, and I'm like, if you just distill it down to simple terms. But we went in and we did over 120 million data pieces. We looked at trends, we looked at our interactions, we looked at our channels, we looked at field-based, and we ran these different models to try and determine behaviors that uniquely grouped people together. And, we started, there were 12. That was too many. There wasn't enough. It was too discrete. And we went to 8. And then we finally landed on these 6. And when you look at this, again, what we were looking at typically, here's what we would say at PG&E. We looked at residential customers, and then we looked at who was on low income. And we'd say 1.5 million residential customers are on low income. That's nearly 30% of all of our residential customers. That's what we kind of looked at, ignoring the other 5 million customers that we have, or 4 million customers. So what we went in, and again, we're using data. I am totally data-driven. My science background and it is data. Now, my gut sometimes reaffirms the data, but it really is data-driven. And the benefit of this for us is that we can then look at customers and anticipate what their issues are, just from patterns of behavior. You look at this struggle, I always point to the screen like you guys can see it. If I can call your attention to the orange box that it says struggle to pay, we looked in that box and we have, I'll round it up, 60,000 people that really, really struggle to pay their bill. They're like 4.5 years behind. We have people in that micro segment that I call it. We have one woman calls us more than there are days in the year. She is calling her utility more than once a day. And so you look at that and we can say, oh, well, here it is, just being reactive instead of proactive. Customer segmentation allows us to be proactive, to reach out to this woman and say, I would like to say your power is free because you cost us more with every call. But it really helps us design and customize and target programs to actually meet specific needs that we've identified in this segment. And again, the use of technology, Einstein, AI, when it comes into play, will help us dramatically in this area. Another interesting fact here is that 30% of our customers don't even talk to us at all. Some of them set it and forget it, and we never hear from them. They have e-bill, they have electronic payment, and we never see or hear from them. There's this stat: the average interaction with your utility is like 6 to 9 minutes a year, depending on what you have it on a year. And the debate is: do we want more? Because if we want more, what are we doing? What are they getting for that? Or do we want zero? And I don't have an answer to that yet. We have to do much more data research and analysis to understand who do we need to be talking to and who they're set it and forget it. So this is our residential customer base. Now, if we go to the small and medium-sized business. Oh, if you can go back one. Okay. And when I look at this, SMB customers, small and medium-sized business customers, they tend to have the highest prices in the utility sector. And what I love this sector because these are our family, friends, our neighbors, our community leaders. They own small businesses. It's the people we interact with on a daily basis. It's the gas station attendant. It's the, the deli that you go to. And for PG&E, this group in our business sector represents 97% of the customer count. So they're a big group, smaller volume, but it is a lot of customers that are here. We know in our service territory, for every one large business, we have between 29 and 30 small and medium-sized businesses. We know that food, the failure rate in restaurant is 50% a year. So there's a lot of people come into the restaurant industry, they go out of the restaurant industry. We know that the small business customer, we say, is the bill to the block of a better California because they represent 99% of the state's employers and they employ about 52% of the workforce. So this is a critical segment, and it tends to either get lumped with, in the past in the utility, it's got lumped with residential. Well, they act a lot like residential. And then the medium size gets lumped with the large, the really big guys, because, well, they act like large customers. So here for us, it's really important that we not only know what services to provide, the ins and outs, and then you can see we looked at our service territory to say, okay, where do we really have to focus in our efforts? So if you look at the dark green, it is dominant small business. So if those small businesses aren't taken care of, we in fact have a problem in that area. But if you looked at it on average, or if you looked at it at a service territory wide, it might get masked. So again, the ability to click in to our small and medium-sized businesses is important. And what we've learned, so they have capital constraints, they have less revenue, their cash flow, like for energy efficiency programs and things that we offer them, they're strapped. Ownership and decision-making is, it could be, the CEO runs the business, but, the founder is still making all the decisions. And we know that energy can be a significant impact to them as they operate their businesses. So then we go to the large segment, the final one. And this is where the case study is going to, we're going to touch on the case study. And rather than go through each one of these, what I'm going to tell you is for each one of these sectors, what we look at, what we have our teams look at, we have dedicated account reps that are assigned to these customers, and they're assigned by segment, so they're not generalists. If you have high tech, you're expected to know that industry better than the customers you're selling to. So it's not just about electricity, it is about knowing the trends, the patterns, what's happening, what's disrupting their industries. So we look at what the environment is, impact of technology. We look at their market outview, not ours, their outlook. We look at energy volatility and trends. We look at new markets. Are they growing businesses? Are they declining businesses? Are they hanging on? And then we look at the demographics and changes that have occurred in their industry, or firmographics in their industry over time. So we look at those for each one. And each one of these segments has a different reaction to a utility. And we have to understand that. And again, in the past, these were our non-res customers. They're non-res customers. We did a lot of averaging. And now the level of sophistication, we go much deeper to understand. And I'm going to end, because this is where the case study is the commercial sector. And I look at this is our retail, food, and hospitality. And why this interests me is CEI, which is the Electric Edison Institute, has what they call a national key account team. And twice a year, they get commercial customers together with utilities, and they meet somewhere in the United States. And, you know, we might have 86 of the big box retail customers, and you can have 100 utilities there. And it's a very effective and efficient way for you to like speed date with all these accounts. Because if you looked at this, if I had a rep, Walmart is in Bentonville, Costco is up in, I'm getting confused, Seattle or Portland, Safeway is here in California, Target's in Minnesota. So for me to send reps out there is pretty expensive. So instead, we get together twice a year. And what is really interesting with this group is they experience all utilities. Like, we have some who deal with over 1,500 different electric and gas suppliers, because it includes munis and co-ops, because their stores are out where sometimes you're a muni and a co-op. This group has to deal with the inefficiency of not having a national utility market. Again, we're 50 states, go back to what I described, 50 states, utility by utility, different policies, different drivers in each state. And this occurs with the energy efficiency program, with demand response, with EVs, with DR. All of the energy programs that are introduced have a different, you know, spin to them, a different twist to them. And to some degree, and to some extent, that some of them just don't participate because the administrative burden and paperwork to participate in these programs nationwide costs more than the actual savings they would get. Now, that's not to say, you know, you look at some of the others on this list that they don't operate nationally. They operate internationally, but it's usually plant by plant. The commercial customers, you know, they're at critical mass. We have one that has like 2,000 locations in just our territory, let alone nationwide. So they're at massive scale, but in smaller units of consumption, or even some small and medium-sized business. So that is where I was going to finish on the philosophy of managing accounts. And then I think that was it, Ben, for this part. And then we were going to go into the case study, but I'll open it up for, oh no, programs. Sorry, the last slide, programs. Oh, how could I forget? So for an illustration, these are the programs that we currently offer our customer base. So we have the low income, and again, I just lost you guys. So we have, you can see down the bottom, the different programs we offer, the budgets that are associated with those programs, and then you look at and say, this is just PG&E. Again, if I am 7-Eleven, if I'm Walmart, if I'm Costco, Target, Staples, McDonald's, Home Depot, Lowe's, these are the ones I meet with. These are the programs that they get offered by utilities across the country for every store that they have. So you can do the math and you can see the level of complexity to try and take advantage of what utilities and states have to offer, but at the same time run their businesses. So I'll end with that and I can look at the questions on chat.
Well, first of all, Deb, we want to take a moment and just celebrate your effort in putting this talk together for us and just spending the hour with us. So we'll give virtual claps here. Thank you very much for presenting this to us. We do have about 5 minutes until we'll do a stretch break, bio break, and then after that we'll go into the case. So if there are folks that have questions, maybe we can have folks kind of put them into the chat. You had mentioned actually Rhode Island is one of the top 4. You know, I think it's kind of obvious why Hawaii and Alaska might be in the top, but why Rhode Island? Do you happen to know? And it's more of a conversational.
I do not know. I could venture a guess, but it would just be a guess and just say because it is a relatively small drive-through state, it has no It has none of the, natural gas. It has none of the infrastructure to support it. So it probably has to import from the more expensive states called New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. But that is just purely a guess. But you know what? I'll take it as a follow-up and get that back.
No. Well, it is, an island. We've seen this with island communities, right? That tends to be a common. But I know it's Rhode Island, but I don't think of it as so much of an island, but it's really an island. Think about it. I have some initial questions for you, and really refreshing to hear your perspective, just because you have seen so many utility models and looking at, again, kind of the regulated versus unregulated. And then, as you talked about kind of flipping it and looking at what is the customer journey and trying to understand, okay, how does the customer kind of experience utilities is really interesting. How important would you say rate structures are? And that may be something you can't get into too much detail on, but there's programs and there's rate structures, and Next 10 just came out with a report on electricity rates, increasing, and the suggestion that we need to switch to a combination of fixed and more of a combination of fixed and volumetric rates to try to address both inequity and also just appropriate pricing. That may be more applicable to residential, but I want to know what your thoughts are on that rate design question and how important that is to meeting customer needs.
So, Ben, I think rate design is critical. It is the methodology for us to take revenue requirements based on that formulaic margin and allocate it appropriately across customer classes. So we have, again, what I call regulatory math that actually allocates revenue requirements, and it is calculus. I look at it and I'm like, I think I'm smart and I can't understand it. And I say that with a tongue in cheek because there is a lot of thought and time and effort put behind it. And I think part of the problem is there is regulatory lag time. So you look at it, we had, there's things changing in the industry with new technology, and yet it takes 18, 24 months to get rate approvals through, or 36 months to get a new GRC, or 12 months. And all for legitimate reasons across. I'm not finger pointing to anyone. There's all valid, reasons this occurs, but we have to stop that and really look at how do we do simplification. We look at our EV rates compared to other states' EV rates, and some are looking at the, automobile leasing model and using rate structures such as that. It really, I think, impacts a lot, and it impacts the customer journey. It's difficult enough to explain what a KWH is, let alone a fixed price, a demand price, a block price, a declining load price, this price. And again, these commercial customers, they see it all. They see every utility rate structure in every state, utility by utility, and they will tell you the good, the bad, the ugly. Demand charge, no demand charge. Peak demand, off peak, super off peak, peak peak, and all of the rate, the price drives the behavior and the ability for programs to be successful, because what you're trying to do is mitigate your usage and your costs. So it all ties together. And I think there needs to be time and effort put toward looking at utility rate structure. People can understand gasoline. That's an energy product, and it's price per gallon. And they can get regional differences, and they know if I use more, it's going to cost me more. And that would be the end game that I would say. That's what we need our customers to be able to say about electricity and natural gas, then we'll be successful. Getting there, that it is not without a lot of challenges. I'd probably be interested in your thoughts on how to get there.
Well, one of the things, and when we talk about getting there, there's a big push, certainly in California, but even kind of across the country for, making electric vehicles part of the solution, at least for light duty vehicles. And to do that really requires a significant reliance, even more reliance, right, on the electric grid. And so when you think about kind of both the customer demand for that, and some of that, again, is policy driven, and then the utility kind of grid assets, right? Depending on when that power is demanded, comes in for demand, that's going to influence whether or not there's serious assets that need to be upgraded within the utility. Again, this all kind of pins on the customer, both the customer demand and then also managing that demand in a way that's favorable to the grid. I wonder yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll share this. What I have learned in my tenure at PG&E is I kind of look at the grade level that we talk to people at, and I look at our communications and I put it through a program and say, what grade level is that? And a lot of our communications is at 16th grade. I don't know what that is. It's 2 after high school. And when you look at other retail suppliers, they try and keep it at that, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, keep it very simple. And even just the language we use to try and get adoption. We talk our talk and expect a customer, I stress test it with my grandkids. They look at me like, what did you say, Mama? Huh? But like, they know the pricing for their data plan and their phone, and they know it for a car. So I think part of it too is just even in the language that we use, the terminology, how we position it. Because I'm with you, it has lasting impacts on EV adoption. It's the trigger point for a consumer to make a decision, and we make that somewhat difficult.